Hey everybody, welcome to Rants by Michaela. So, I've already discussed the advantages and the disadvantages of allowing your children to stay at home after the age of 18 and break the pathology, so to speak. If you allow your children to stay at home past the age of 18, you give them the opportunity to focus on their academic or their professional careers without the added stress of taking care of their survival at the moment. In essence, being a wonderful support system to your children while they transition into the realities of adulthood. But some of the disadvantages of allowing your children to stay at home too long, if they're not focused on their academics or their professional career, then you basically run around with a bunch of entitled, lazy, um, immature children who run around wanting the respect of an adult, meanwhile, they're avoiding the responsibilities of an adult. And that's just not possible in this world. That can't happen. Our job and our responsibility as parents is to prepare our children for the adult world. And the adult world can be a lot of fun and it can be easy to maneuver if given the proper tools. So, in this video, I'm going to go ahead and discuss what some of the benefits are, some of the knowledge and wisdom that your children are going to eventually end up learning as a result of being kicked out of the home at the age of 18 and being a bird who's forced to leave the nest and fly into um, the realities of the real world and what it has to offer. And a lot of what I'm getting ready to tell you children are going to learn comes from my own personal experience as someone who has left the nest at the age of 18, as well as the experience of some of my friends and family members that I was able to transition from childhood into adulthood right after I had perfected what it meant to get my life together and utilize some of my intelligence and my wisdom as well as my resources, whether it was a home that I could help provide for them while they transitioned or money that I could help them get, so that they would be able to slowly but surely maneuver into the real world as independent, successful adults themselves. So, one of the first things that I want to let you know that I learned while being a child at the age of 18, ready to move out of the house. I wasn't forced out of the house, but I was ready to move out of the house. And one of the things that I learned was how unreliable your friends are. Not something you were thinking that I was going to say, right? Usually when people talk about transitioning into adulthood, they talk about the financing, the financial aspect of it. But I'm actually talking about the social aspect of it. See, I come from a toxic household environment. It was very bad. It got to the point where it was just not feasible. It just wasn't practical for my mother and I to continue to live under the same dwelling. Our relationship was incredibly toxic. It was incredibly volatile, and at many times it got aggressive and violent. It just wasn't necessary to be in such a dysfunctional environment all the time just because we were related, and I knew I had to get out. One weekend for Mother's Day in 2007, I had contacted just about every single solitary friend, so-called friend, that I had, asking them if I could have a place to stay, if I could just have their couch for a couple of days until I got paid my financial aid check and until I got paid from work again. At the time, I had a really great job. Minimum wage was $6.75, but I was making $13.75 an hour, and I was getting paid weekly every Thursday. So I had already had some money saved up in my bank account. I had cut my mom off from my account, changed the passwords to my online account so she couldn't have unlimited access to my money anymore. I was just waiting on one more paycheck, and as well as a financial aid check that I believed was going to be something like $1,500 so that I could go ahead and move out. And I called 17 people. 17 people, asking them for a place to stay, letting them know the situation that I had with my mom and how it had become progressively more dangerous for the both of us to live in the same house, and asked if they would be willing to help me out. 16 people responded with, "Oh, I'm so sorry you're in this situation. Oh my gosh, I wish you the best of luck. I'm going to pray for you. Oh, what are you going to do?" Here I am calling you, a person who I thought was my friend, and your response to me is, "What are you going to do?" In other words, I have no intentions of actually being there for you. Best of luck. See, the people that matter in your life are the ones that show up for you. And every single one of those people showed me at that point in time that they were not going to show up for me. They didn't even bother to turn around and ask their moms if it was okay for me to stay over. They didn't try and see if their grandparents may have had a place to stay for me, aunts and uncles, cousins, somebody that would have been able to help me out, somebody that they would have been able to ask, and then them be able to vouch for me as to what type of responsible person that I am, who wouldn't take advantage of them, but just really truly needed a place to stay for a couple of days. They didn't even try. That let me know that they weren't really my friends. Because one of the things that you'll learn in life, in society, someone who's truly your friend would have at least given you their couch. Even if it's not their couch, even if they still live at their parents' house, even if you can't blame them for not truly being able to come through for you the way that you would have at least tried to come through for them, because they can't even come through for themselves, you can tell the people who at least try to figure something out for you, and not a single one of them even tried. After that, I deleted 16 numbers from my phone. Only one person was able to give me their couch for 2 weeks until I went ahead and found my own place. And I went to go stay with that person, stayed there for 2 weeks, got my own place, or actually moved into a roommate situation, and it was done after that. I from that point on, was on my own. 6 months later, I had purchased a brand new car and moved from a roommate situation into my own studio apartment. And I decided that I wanted to revamp my social life again. So I started hanging out with more people that I met at work, more people that I had met at school. I was attending Los Angeles Valley College. And there were times when I had decided I really wanted to go out and hang out with people. I wanted to go to theme parks. I wanted to go to amusement parks. I wanted to go to the circus with somebody, restaurants, clubs, maybe even go traveling, see different parts of the world. Just all I needed was somebody to go with to make the experience more fun. And I started to realize that while I was working hard to be a respectable adult that was making a way for herself in the real world with her own place, her own car, a really nice job with a disposable income, as well as working on her college education, a lot of my friends were just not motivated like that. A lot of them were not willing to get away from minimum wage. A lot of them were not trying to buy brand new cars that they would have to make payments on. They drove these hoopties that, every time you turn around was overheating in the middle of the street and they didn't know what was wrong with it. They still lived at their parents' house, so they were still under their parents' rules. They still had to be mindful who they hung out with. They had to be mindful of a curfew. Their parents wouldn't let them back in the house after a certain time. Just a lot of the things that you don't have to deal with when you're living out on your own anymore. And sometimes you realize that even though your friends made money and still lived at their parents' house, they almost never had any money to do anything. So you were never going to be able to truly have a good time unless you were the one paying for everything. At that point in time, you start to realize not necessarily who's in your corner like last time, but who's operating at the same energy level as you. And sometimes, even as Oprah said it, you have to cut people off because they no longer match your energy. So you start to learn how to be careful who it is that you keep in your inner circle, who it is that you hang around with, because either not a lot of people are going to be there for you in your time of need, or not a lot of people are going to meet you at your mental wavelength that you need them to meet you at. And when you do whatever it is that you need to do to work hard to get to where you need to be so that you could achieve that level of independence, where you have a good income, your own place, your own car, and you're living comfortably, you realize that you're developing a maturity when it comes to knowing exactly what it takes to achieve that goal, and how a lot of people are holding themselves back simply because they lack the maturity to move forward like you do. So that is one of the lessons that your children are going to learn when you get them to leave the nest and experience the real world firsthand. They're going to find who is and is not in their corner that they'd be able to depend on, and who's operating at their same wavelength now that your children understand what it's like to have to work and go out there and get their own without their own support system, and how being the only responsible friend amongst your friend group puts you in a position where you may no longer have anything in common with some of those bad eggs that you probably previously were afraid of your children getting into deep with. Not only does this translate when it comes to friends, but this will also translate when it comes to relationships as well. No one wants anything to do with a boyfriend or a girlfriend who's not operating on the same wavelength as that person. Anyway, that's my rant. You guys have a good one.